Airports are places where lives cross in fleeting moments, where people rush past each other without knowing the storms others are carrying inside. But sometimes a single scene can freeze the entire terminal in silence. At Dallas-Fort Worth that morning, passengers at gate C12 were drawn into a confrontation so unexpected and so charged that many instinctively raised their phones to record, unaware that they were capturing the beginning of a story that would shake the very core of trust in authority and dignity. A woman in uniform stood accused, her composure colliding against loud suspicion, and what looked like a misunderstanding soon spiraled into something far deeper, a test of character, prejudice, and truth. What none of those onlookers knew was that the person being humiliated carried a secret that, once revealed, would turn the entire situation upside down and leave everyone questioning what they had just witnessed. If you want to see how this unfolds, hit like and subscribe to stay with me until the final revelation. And tell me in the comments what you expect this hidden truth might be and where in the world you are watching from. Naomi Harris had long ago learned how to walk through airports with grace, her uniform pressed crisp, her shoes shining like mirrors, her cap angled with perfect formality. But on that particular morning, her steps felt heavier, as if the weight of years of struggle pressed down on her shoulders. She was on her way to lead another routine flight, a Denver-bound route she had studied thoroughly the night before, with weather reports, charts, and schedules memorized as second nature. Yet what was supposed to be a simple transition from terminal to jetway shattered in a moment, pierced by the voice of Linda Parker. It rang out loud and sharp, demanding attention, startling both passengers and staff. "Security! We've got an impersonator at gate C12." The absurdity of the accusation made Naomi pause mid-step, her flight case hanging from her fingers as the crowd's murmur swelled into a tide of curious stares. It was as if the entire terminal held its breath, waiting to see how one woman in uniform would respond to being labeled a fraud. Naomi's head turned slowly, her face composed, though her heartbeat quickened. She had faced whispers, dismissals, even disbelief in her career before, but never such a brazen accusation thrown at her in her own workplace. In front of the passengers she was sworn to serve. Linda stood behind the counter, stiff with self-importance, her finger raised in accusation, her voice climbing higher with every word. "Ma'am, I don't know where you got that costume, but you need to leave this secure area immediately." The phrase stung. Costume. That uniform had taken years of relentless training, sleepless nights of study, thousands of logged flight hours in weather that tested her limits, and assessments designed to weed out those who weren't strong enough. To call it a costume was to deny every sacrifice Naomi had made. The nearby passengers reacted with fascination, some shocked, others intrigued by the commotion. A businessman folded down his newspaper, his brows furrowed with interest. A pair of teenagers leaned against the wall, phones angled high, recording every second, eager to catch what might become viral. Their screens glowed as they zoomed in on Naomi's face, on Linda's wagging finger, on the growing tension that seemed to hum in the air like static before a storm. Naomi felt the familiar grip of humiliation, but fought to keep her expression neutral. She would not give her accuser the satisfaction of seeing anger. Then Linda delivered her most venomous blow, her voice loud enough to carry across 3 gates. "Real pilots don't look like. Well, you people know what I mean." The implication hung heavy, poisonous in its cowardly vagueness. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, some shaking their heads, others whispering, but nobody stepped forward to intervene. Naomi's chest tightened, her jaw firming as she lowered her briefcase carefully to the floor, the clipped badge at its side catching a flicker of fluorescent light, though few noticed. What they did notice was Naomi reaching calmly into her jacket pocket and withdrawing her laminated FAA license. She extended it with the same steady hand she used to control the yoke of an aircraft. "Here is my license," she began, her voice even, each word measured. But Linda's hand dismissed it without so much as a glance. "Anyone can fake those online these days," Linda scoffed. The crowd reacted audibly now, murmurs of disbelief rippling outward. A woman whispered, "That looks real," while another man muttered, "This is ridiculous." Yet Linda was emboldened by her audience. She turned her performance outward, speaking not to Naomi, but to the gathered strangers. You see how they try to sneak into restricted areas? This is a security risk. Terrorism starts like this. The word terrorism dropped like a stone into the silence, sending ripples of unease across the terminal. A mother clutched her child closer. A man with a rolling bag stepped back nervously. It was no longer just about uniform or credentials. Linda had poisoned the crowd with fear. Naomi took in the faces around her, felt the dozens of cameras trained on her, and understood the battle was no longer just personal. It had become public, amplified by every phone, every whisper, every assumption. Yet she did not let fear dictate her response. Calm was her armor, documentation her weapon. She reached into her flight bag and methodically withdrew her logbook, her printed weather reports, her flight manual with today's Denver route carefully marked. Each item landed on the counter with deliberate precision, evidence of her legitimacy. But Linda swept them aside with one arm, scattering papers to the floor. "Anyone can print fake paperwork," she declared. Naomi crouched briefly, gathering her scattered documents with quiet dignity, refusing to let the gesture be mistaken for submission. As she stood, her uniform gleamed beneath the harsh lights, her captain's stripes unshaken by the accusations raining down on her. She glanced briefly at the departure screen. Flight 447, Denver, boarding in less than an hour. She had a duty to fulfill, but the gate agent blocking her path was determined to strip her of her authority before the eyes of strangers. The phones recorded on, capturing not just Naomi's stillness, but the venom of Linda's words. Each moment became digital evidence, preserved beyond the terminal. Naomi knew deep in her bones that this was no longer just about her own dignity. It was about every black pilot who had been doubted, every woman in uniform who had been second-guessed, every professional who had been told they didn't belong. Her presence at Gate C-12 had become a stand-in for a larger battle, one she had not chosen, but one she would not abandon. Calmly, she extended her company ID badge, the plastic rectangle with her face, her employee number, the Skyjet Airways logo embossed in corporate blue. The magnetic stripe shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights as she held it forward for Linda to inspect. "Ma'am, I've been with Skyjet for 6 years," Naomi said, her voice even, professional, deliberate. "I am scheduled to fly Flight 447 to Denver this morning. Here is my official badge." The words should have been enough, but Linda gave the badge only a cursory glance, her lips curling into a sneer, and shook her head. "This looks like something you printed at a copy shop. Real airline pilots don't just show up flashing IDs and licenses. Real captains go through years of training at military academies or prestigious schools. They don't just hand out those titles to anyone walking in off the street." Her voice grew louder with every word, designed not just to humiliate Naomi, but to make the crowd complicit in her disbelief. Passengers gasped, muttered, whispered, while the phones tilted higher, catching Naomi's every move. The live stream being broadcast by Chloe Grant captured it all, her voice now a hushed commentary into the mic. "She's literally got the ID, the uniform, everything, and this woman is still harassing her. This is crazy." Chloe's viewers, climbing from dozens to hundreds, flooded the chat with outrage. Some typed furiously, demanding that Naomi be treated with respect, while others speculated how such a scene could even be happening in 2025. Naomi held the badge firmly, resisting the urge to snatch it back, resisting the temptation to raise her voice. Every instinct screamed that anger would only feed Linda's performance. Instead, Naomi leaned down and pulled her flight bag closer, setting it atop the counter. She unzipped it with the precision of someone opening a toolkit she had prepared her entire career. Out came her flight manual, its worn leather cover a testament to years of service. Out came her aviation charts for Denver International, printed at 5 a.m. that morning, complete with weather patterns and alternate routes. Out came her logbook, showing 3,847 recorded hours across 12 types of aircraft, signed off by federal examiners. She placed each item on the counter with deliberate calm, as if setting evidence before a jury. "Here," she said quietly but firmly, "is my route study for today's flight, current weather conditions for Denver, my logbook showing currency training completed last month, and my medical certificate renewed just 60 days ago. For a moment, the weight of the documents on the counter created a silence. The passengers leaned closer. Even Officer Martinez, an airport security veteran who had arrived moments earlier, seemed inclined to study the materials. But Linda would not relent. With one sweeping motion of her arm, she knocked the documents aside, sending pages fluttering to the terminal floor. "Anyone can fake paperwork," she announced, her voice triumphant, her eyes shining with a zeal that made Naomi realize this was not about logic, not about credentials, but about prejudice dressed as authority. "I've seen this before. People trying to sneak into cockpits, steal planes, endanger lives. Terrorists. And I won't let happen on my watch." The word again. Terrorists. It hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Passengers who had drawn near to glimpse the paperwork now recoiled, some clutching their belongings, others backing away as if Naomi's mere presence threatened them. Fear spread easily when fed by authority, and Linda was feeding it with every word. Naomi crouched and collected her scattered documents with quiet hands, her uniform stripes gleaming as she straightened once more. She looked at Linda directly, her voice calm though every nerve in her body pulsed with humiliation. "I have complied with every request. I have provided every credential required by law. You are refusing to recognize any of it." But Linda only crossed her arms, her voice shrill. "Because none of it's real. I trust my eyes and my common sense. And my common sense tells me you don't belong in a cockpit." The crowd shifted uneasily, murmurs turning into angry whispers, and Chloe's live stream surged past 1,000 viewers. Comments rolled in faster than she could read. "This is discrimination plain and simple. Check the manifest. Somebody call the airline right now. What year is this? How can this be happening?" The tension mounted with every second Naomi stood blocked from her duty. Her phone buzzed with a reminder of the executive presentation she had later that morning, but she dismissed it quickly. Right now, her job was to weather the storm. And yet, even as she stood still, the storm built itself higher. His eyes brightened when he spotted Naomi, but the look quickly turned to shock as he took in the tense standoff, the scattered documents still being collected, the cluster of passengers filming, and Linda standing like a guard dog blocking the path. "Captain Harris," he called warmly, his voice carrying across the terminal. "Ready for another smooth flight to Denver?" His words were deliberate, public, an affirmation of her authority. But Linda spun on him, her face snapping with hostility. "Oh, so now you're in on this scam too," she barked, and the crowd gasped. Ethan froze, his jaw dropping in disbelief. "Scam? What are you talking about? She's my captain. We've flown together for 8 months. Just last week we did the Miami route." His words rang with sincerity, his tone indignant, but Linda dismissed him with the same venom she had used against Naomi. "I don't know what game you two are playing," she said loudly, making sure everyone heard, "but I'm not falling for it. Real pilots have proper channels, proper procedures. They don't wander around in costumes pretending they belong here." Naomi felt Ethan's frustration boiling beside her, but she lifted a hand slightly, signaling him to remain calm. She knew anger would only feed Linda's performance. She kept her tone level as she spoke. "Ethan is my first officer. He is assigned to this flight with me. We are both on today's crew manifest." But Linda cut her off. "Manifest? That's what fakers always claim. They talk about documents and procedures, but anyone can make up a story." The crowd's murmurs deepened. Some passengers shook their heads in disbelief. Others typed furiously into their phones, adding to Chloe's growing audience. Already, her live stream had crossed several thousand viewers, each one watching the gate agent deny the legitimacy of a captain and her co-pilot in full uniform. The absurdity only seemed to feed the outrage online. Before Naomi could respond further, another familiar figure appeared, Flight Attendant Grace Lynn, her rolling bag clicking against the tiles as she approached. Her face lit with recognition when she saw Naomi, but as soon as she caught the hostile posture of Linda and the tense expressions of the passengers, her smile vanished. "What's happening here?" she asked Ethan quietly, glancing between Naomi and the gate agent. Ethan shook his head, his voice edged with disbelief. Linda thinks Captain Harris is impersonating a pilot. Grace's face drained of color. She looked from Naomi to Linda and back again, her lips parting in shock. "Are you serious? She's our captain. I served her coffee 3 days ago on the Boston run." Grace turned toward Linda, her voice firm now. "She has flown with us countless times." But Linda, hearing this, only hardened her stance, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Oh, sure," she said with a sneer. "Now you're all part of the conspiracy. How much are they paying you to go along with this? How many of you are in on it?" She spread her arms dramatically, her voice climbing to theatrical heights. "This is bigger than just one person in a costume. This is an organized scam." The words sent fresh ripples of disbelief through the crowd. Passengers shook their heads, muttering under their breath about the absurdity of accusing 3 uniformed crew members of faking their roles. Chloe's livestream count ticked rapidly upward, more viewers flooding in to witness the confrontation unravel. The comments filled with disbelief and fury. 3 of them? This is insane. How is this woman still employed? Check the airline system already. Naomi felt her patience tested to the breaking point, but she refused to let it show. Instead, she straightened and addressed Linda directly, her voice measured and professional. "You are disregarding not only my credentials, but the testimony of my co-pilot and my flight attendant. This is not a matter of opinion, it is a matter of fact. We are assigned to Flight 447. If you doubt it, call crew scheduling. Check the manifest system." Her words were clear, logical, the kind that should have ended the argument instantly. But Linda crossed her arms tighter, her chin lifting with defiance. "I don't need to check anything. My eyes tell me what's real, and my eyes tell me you don't belong." Ethan stepped forward now, unable to hold back his frustration. His voice carried the sharp edge of warning. "Linda, you're making a serious mistake. You are blocking your own flight crew from reaching their aircraft. This isn't just offensive, it's dangerous." Grace nodded firmly, her eyes flashing with anger. "And it's discrimination, pure and simple. You can't just decide who looks like a pilot and who doesn't. That's not how this works." But Linda shot back with venom. "Discrimination? Don't throw that word at me. This is about safety. You people always pull that card when you're caught doing something wrong." Her words stung, laced with denial and prejudice, and the crowd audibly reacted. Some booing, others shouting back, voices rising until the gate area buzzed with chaos. Chloe's livestream count surged again, breaking into the tens of thousands. Viewers around the world now typed furious responses, demanding justice, tagging the airline, tagging news outlets, insisting the incident be addressed immediately. Naomi's phone buzzed suddenly, the vibration sharp in her pocket, and when she glanced at the screen, she saw a familiar name that made her heart steady. Chief Pilot Robert Hayes. She answered with calm precision, putting the call on speaker so her words would carry. "Good morning, Chief," she said evenly. His voice, gravelly and authoritative, cut through the chaos around her. "Captain Harris, where are you? Flight 447 should be boarding soon." Naomi's eyes flicked toward Linda, then to Ethan and Grace. "Sir, I'm at gate C12. There seems to be confusion about my crew assignment." Hayes' response came quick, his tone incredulous. "Confusion? What are you talking about? You are the pilot in command for the Denver route. I assigned you myself last Friday." His words should have ended the matter instantly. Passengers around the gate straightened, some nodding, others whispering that this proved she was exactly who she claimed to be. Yet Linda was not done. She lunged forward, her hand snapping out. "Let me speak to whoever that is," she demanded, her voice dripping with suspicion. Naomi held the phone firmly, refusing to hand it over. "Chief, the gate supervisor believes I am impersonating a pilot." There was a pause on the line, a silence heavy enough to draw the attention of everyone present. Then Hayes' voice boomed loud enough to be heard 3 gates away. "Put that supervisor on the phone. Now." The demand cracked like a whip. Linda hesitated, then glanced toward her own supervisor, Mark Ellison, who had just arrived, his face tight with disapproval and his badge swaying as he strode forward. Mark extended his hand, and Naomi passed the phone to him smoothly. "This is Mark Ellison, Gate Operations," he said stiffly, his voice carrying false authority. The reply from Hayes shook the air. "Ellison, what the hell is wrong with you? Captain Harris is one of our most experienced pilots. She has logged more hours than half the senior staff. You will put her on that plane right now, or you'll be explaining to corporate why Flight 447 missed its departure slot." Gasps erupted from the passengers. Chloe's live-stream comments exploded with celebration, emojis flying across the screen, the viewer count leaping past 15,000. But Mark, his face flushing red, clung to his authority like a drowning man to a rope. He ended the call abruptly, snapping the phone closed, then faced the crowd. "Anyone can fake a phone call," he insisted, his voice shrill. "Voice changers, accomplices, sophisticated scams. I've seen them all in my 15 years of operations. Don't be fooled." His words were so desperate they rang hollow, but Linda nodded vigorously beside him, clinging to his denial. "Exactly," she said loudly. "We can't just trust a voice on the phone. This is about safety." Naomi kept her composure, but inside she could feel the frustration burn. She had provided licenses, badges, logbooks, manuals, and now even the chief pilot's direct confirmation, and still she was being treated as a fraud. It was no longer just humiliation, it was deliberate erasure of her authority. Ethan stepped forward again, his voice tight with warning. "Mark, you are blocking the pilot in command from doing her job. You're jeopardizing the flight. This is reckless." Grace's eyes flashed as she added, "You heard the chief pilot confirm her identity. Are you really going to stand here and call him a liar?" But Mark's face twisted with pride and fear. "I follow procedures, not voices over a phone line," he snapped. "For all I know, you three are staging this to scam your way into a restricted area. I will not be responsible for a breach of security." His words only deepened the outrage of the passengers. A man in a business suit shouted from the back, "Then check the damn system. Look at the crew manifest." Others chimed in, echoing his demand. But Mark turned on them harshly. "Do not interfere with airport security matters. This is protocol." The crowd hissed with anger, their frustration boiling. Chloe's live stream jumped again, nearly 20,000 people now watching the escalation. Some commented that this was clear racial profiling, others tagged news outlets, and some urged immediate calls to the airline's corporate office. Naomi knew the moment was spiraling beyond control, but she remained calm, her voice steady, her eyes locked on Mark's. "You have heard from my co-pilot, from my flight attendant, from my chief pilot, and from my documentation. You are refusing to accept all of it. This is not protocol. This is discrimination." The words struck like a hammer, forcing silence over the crowd for a brief moment. Mark bristled, his face darkening. "Watch your tone, Captain, or you'll be looking for new employment." His threat hung in the air, toxic, blatant, undeniable. Passengers gasped audibly, their disbelief turning to fury. Phones captured every second. Chloe's live stream flashing comments faster than eyes could track. He threatened her job. Corporate is going to melt down when they see this. This is insane. Naomi drew herself up taller, her voice still controlled. "Threats do not erase the truth, Mark. They only expose your fear of it." Her words were calm but devastating, resonating through the silence that followed. Linda shifted uncomfortably beside him, the weight of the passenger's judgment now pressing against her as well. The word discrimination had struck deep, and there was no undoing it. Security officers looked at each other, uncertainty clouding their faces, caught between their orders and their conscience. The stage was set for something larger than any of them could have imagined. Naomi understood that arguing further would yield nothing because Mark and Linda were no longer motivated by protocol or truth, but by ego and prejudice. As the crowd buzzed and phones captured every frame, Naomi glanced at her Omega Speedmaster watch, then at the phone still in her hand, and she realized the situation had spiraled into something she could use to expose what she had always known simmered beneath the surface of airline operations. Slowly, she stepped back from the counter, lifting her phone once more, scrolling through her contacts with deliberate precision until she highlighted a single name saved as director. She pressed call, her voice dropping low, just loud enough to be caught by the microphones of surrounding phones. "Good morning," she said, her tone calm, her face unreadable. "Yes, I'm here at the gate. The situation is developing exactly as we discussed." The words sliced through the noise around her, quiet yet powerful, vague enough to ignite immediate speculation among passengers and live-stream viewers. Chloe's audience exploded with commentary, the chat filling with wild guesses. "Who is she calling?" She said director. "What does that mean? This is bigger than just a flight." Naomi continued speaking softly, deliberately not naming specifics, but planting phrases like seeds into the ears of those listening. "Documented thoroughly. Board presentation. Systemic issues." She ended the call with a calm, "Understood. I'll see you at the meeting," before slipping her phone back into her pocket. Gasps rippled through the passengers, whispers colliding with the constant click of cameras. Ethan gave her a questioning look, but Naomi only gave the faintest shake of her head, a silent promise that clarity would come in time. She looked at Mark and Linda, both of whom seemed momentarily rattled by her mysterious words. For the first time, cracks of doubt appeared in their expressions, as if they suddenly feared they were not humiliating just a pilot, but someone far more dangerous to their careers. Before anyone could press further, movement at the front of the terminal drew eyes toward the glass doors. A Channel 7 News van screeched to a halt outside, the satellite dish rising, a reporter and cameraman rushing through the entrance with equipment in hand. Social media had spread Chloe's live stream so quickly that a professional news crew had decided to cover the story in real time. The arrival of the press injected a new energy into the scene, amplifying tension tenfold. Mark turned pale, the flush of arrogance draining from his face as he saw the camera lights flick on. "This is a security matter, not a media circus," he barked, his voice cracking. But his words held no weight against the presence of an accredited news station. Reporter Amanda Foster strode forward, microphone raised, her professional eye instantly identifying the central figures. Naomi Harris, dignified in her uniform. Mark Ellison, flustered and sweating. Linda Parker, still standing defiantly but looking increasingly cornered. And the cluster of passengers holding their phones high like courtroom spectators. Amanda gestured for her cameraman to roll. "This is Amanda Foster, Channel 7 News, reporting live from Dallas-Fort Worth Airport," she began, her voice strong and clear. "We are witnessing what appears to be a discrimination incident involving a uniformed airline captain being accused of impersonation by gate staff." Her words cut through the terminal, branding the situation for what it was in front of thousands watching on television and tens of thousands watching online. Mark sputtered, trying to interject, but Amanda ignored him, her camera trained firmly on Naomi. For the first time that morning, Naomi allowed herself a small, controlled smile. She glanced at her watch once more, her quiet words audible enough to be caught on multiple recordings. Perfect timing. Chloe's live stream erupted, comments flooding in. "She planned this. Plot twist incoming. This woman is a genius." Passengers around the gate leaned closer, their earlier unease shifting into awe, as if they were finally beginning to realize Naomi had not been caught off guard, but had been steering the situation all along. Naomi bent briefly to adjust her briefcase, and as she lifted it upright, the faint glint of an executive committee badge clipped to the side caught the camera's light. Few passengers noticed, but Ethan saw it, his eyes widening slightly as if he understood the implication. Grace, too, noticed the way Naomi handled herself, the calm of someone who knew she was not just defending herself, but laying a trap. Mark attempted to regain control, his voice rising louder. "Everyone disperse immediately. This is a private security matter and will be handled internally." But no one moved. The passengers ignored him. Amanda Foster kept her camera trained. Chloe's live stream hit 30,000 viewers, and the crowd had grown so large that even neighboring gate areas had emptied as curious onlookers joined the spectacle. Naomi waited, letting Mark's desperation hang in the air before she spoke again, her tone calm, deliberate, and devastating. "You have disregarded my licenses, my logbooks, my ID badge, the testimony of my colleagues, and the confirmation of my chief pilot. You have chosen to escalate this into something much larger. And now, the press is here. Everything is documented, recorded, and broadcast in real time. So tell me, Mark, what exactly are you protecting? Because it certainly isn't safety." Her words echoed like a verdict, each syllable sharp, each phrase cutting through the illusion of authority Mark and Linda had tried to maintain. Whispers rippled through the passengers that this was not merely a captain defending herself, but something much larger, a carefully staged moment unfolding. Amanda Foster's news crew continued rolling, capturing every twitch, every glance, every word that passed between Naomi and her accusers. Naomi bent toward her briefcase again, her movements measured, as though she were aware every camera was fixed on her. She opened it with a soft click, and inside, the passengers glimpsed not just papers, but an orderly stack of documents that looked far beyond flight prep. At the very top lay a laminated letter on official corporate letterhead, the kind reserved for executive appointments, with a Skyline Airways logo shining faintly under the lights. Naomi lifted it with both hands, her face calm, but her voice carrying with quiet authority. "My name is Captain Naomi Harris," she said evenly, meeting the eyes of Mark, Linda, and the crowd around her. "I have flown with this company for 6 years, as many of you have just heard confirmed. But as of 6 o'clock this morning, I am also the newly appointed Regional Director of Operations for Skyjet Airways Midwest Division." The terminal fell into absolute silence. For a moment, even the buzzing of phones seemed to stop, as though time itself had frozen to absorb her words. Mark blinked rapidly, his lips parting but no sound escaping. Linda's face drained of color, her arms falling limp at her sides. Passengers stared, their mouths open, struggling to process that the woman who had been accused of impersonation, humiliated in public, and denied her credentials was in fact the newly promoted executive overseeing nearly half the company's operations. Chloe's live stream viewers exploded, comments pouring in so fast they blurred into unreadable rivers of text. "She's the boss," one comment screamed across the feed. "Plot twist of the century," another exclaimed. Amanda Foster nearly dropped her microphone, her journalistic instincts firing with the thrill of breaking a national story in real time. Her cameraman zoomed in on the letter, catching the corporate seal, the CEO's signature, and the effective date, today. Naomi let the silence linger, knowing the weight of the revelation needed no embellishment. Then she spoke again, her tone calm, professional, devastating. "This appointment grants me oversight of operations for 47 airports across 12 states. Every action taken here this morning has been documented. Every word, every accusation, every refusal to examine credentials has been recorded for review." She gestured briefly toward Chloe's phone and Amanda's camera. "We have real-time evidence of systemic discrimination, captured publicly, with tens of thousands already watching." The murmurs of the passengers rose, a mix of disbelief, admiration, and vindication. A businessman in the crowd whispered, "She set this up perfectly," while another passenger muttered, "They just destroyed themselves." Mark finally found his voice, but it cracked as he stammered, That's impossible. You can't be a captain and a director. That's not how this works." Naomi's eyes locked on his, steady and unwavering. "It is exactly how this works when leadership decides accountability is more important than complacency. I accepted this role knowing precisely what I would find, and you have just provided the clearest case study I could have asked for." Linda tried to speak, her voice trembling. "But how was I supposed to know? You don't look," she cut herself off, realizing the hole she was digging. Naomi stepped closer, her presence towering without raising her voice. "Don't look like what, Miss Parker?" The question hung heavy in the air, the silence broken only by the sound of Chloe's viewers flooding her chat with outrage. Linda's silence was its own confession, louder than any words she could have offered. Naomi turned back to the crowd, holding the letter high so all could see. "This morning was supposed to be routine, but instead of treating me as the professional I am, gate staff chose to see me as a threat. They ignored licenses, they ignored IDs, they ignored the confirmation of my colleagues and even my chief pilot. They accused me of terrorism, of fraud, of conspiracy. And now, in front of the press and in front of you all, I reveal that I am not only your captain, but the regional director responsible for ensuring this never happens again." Her words struck like thunder, each phrase measured, but carrying the power of justice delivered publicly. Amanda Foster thrust her microphone closer, her voice shaking with excitement. "Captain Harris, can you confirm that this promotion was finalized today?" Naomi nodded. "At 5:30 this morning, the board approved my appointment. My first official duty was to conduct an unannounced assessment of gate operations and crew treatment protocols. What happened here is precisely why this position exists." The weight of her words crushed Mark and Linda. Mark's shoulders sagged visibly, his earlier bravado extinguished. Linda's eyes darted around the terminal as if seeking escape. But there was none. They had written their own downfall, and Naomi had merely provided the stage. Naomi lowered the letter back into her briefcase, her movements deliberate, then looked at the security officers still lingering nearby. "Officers, you asked for my identification. You examined it. You know it is legitimate. Now you also know that every action taken here has been under the scrutiny of corporate leadership." Officer Martinez, who had earlier confirmed her license, looked real, nodded silently, his eyes showing both respect and regret. Chloe's livestream now soared past 30,000 viewers, the chat filled with vindication and awe. "She planned it perfectly," one comment read. "This is Justice Live." Amanda Foster turned back to the camera, summarizing breathlessly. What began as an accusation of impersonation has just transformed into one of the most shocking moments in recent airline history. The accused pilot is not only legitimate, but has just revealed she is the newly appointed Regional Director of Operations. This is unprecedented. The passengers erupted in applause, cheers mixing with shouts of support. Naomi accepted it with a small nod, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp. This was not celebration, it was evidence. Evidence that prejudice exposed in the open could be dismantled in the same way. Mark Ellison and Linda Parker stood pale and silent, their authority shattered, their arrogance stripped away. But Naomi was not finished. She had given them the title and the truth, but now she would give them the evidence, the kind that left no room for excuses or denial. Slowly and deliberately, she opened her briefcase once again and pulled out a thick binder labeled Discrimination Audit Confidential. Its presence alone drew gasps, the red letters across the cover a warning that what lay inside was damning. She placed the binder on the counter, its weight resounding like a gavel striking wood. Then she withdrew several other documents, each one marked with corporate seals, legal headers, and financial data sheets. She raised her voice just enough to carry across the terminal. "Let's be clear about what has transpired here this morning. You ignored my FAA license, my medical certificate, my logbook, my route study, my ID badge. You disregarded the testimony of my co-pilot, my flight attendant, and my chief pilot. You dismissed the word of corporate leadership itself. Instead, you chose to accuse me of fraud, of conspiracy, even of terrorism. That is not merely disrespectful. That is unlawful." Gasps rippled through the passengers, their faces hardening against Mark and Linda. Chloe's livestream filled with fire emojis and outrage. Naomi picked up one of the documents and held it high. "This," she said firmly, "is your own training acknowledgement, Ms. Parker. You completed diversity training in 2014, 2017, 2020, and again in 2023. Your signature is right here beneath the words, 'Respect every customer and colleague.' And yet, today, you ignored every credential placed in front of you because of one thing, because of how I look." She set the page down like evidence before a jury. Linda's lips trembled, her eyes darting helplessly, but she said nothing. Naomi reached for another page, this one stamped with corporate policy codes. "And you, Mr. Ellison, have signed acknowledgement of Title VII compliance under the Civil Rights Act as part of your supervisory role. You are fully aware that discrimination based on race is prohibited. You have been trained, retrained, and reminded. Yet here you stand, denying not only my qualifications, but my humanity, in front of passengers, staff, media, and tens of thousands of witnesses online." Mark's face flushed, sweat beading at his temples. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his words stuck in his throat. Naomi did not stop. She turned to the financial data she had retrieved earlier and tapped the numbers with a finger. Skyjet Airways has already lost 2.3% of its market value this morning as a direct result of this incident trending online. That equates to nearly $850 million in shareholder value evaporated in less than an hour. And with every minute that passes, every second that Chloe's live stream continues climbing in viewership, that number grows. This is no longer just about personal dignity. This is about corporate liability, brand destruction, and legal consequences. The crowd stirred, businessmen pulling out their phones to check stock prices, murmurs of disbelief rising into the air. Amanda Foster leaned into her microphone, narrating every revelation as though reading a headline. Captain Harris has just presented internal training records, policy acknowledgments, and real-time financial losses tied to the incident. This has escalated beyond discrimination into a full-blown corporate crisis. Naomi lifted another document, this one carrying the seal of the Department of Transportation. According to Federal Aviation Regulation 117.3, crew members are to be treated with respect and dignity as part of safety protocols. Violation of these standards carries penalties of up to $400,000 per incident, as well as potential criminal charges. And under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, workplace discrimination claims amplified by social media have resulted in damages ranging from $50,000 to $300,000 per case. With 30,000 viewers on this live stream alone, the punitive damages scale accordingly. You have not only humiliated me, you have exposed this airline to millions in damages and to a regulatory review. Her voice was calm, clinical, precise, the tone of someone who had prepared this case long before walking into the terminal. The evidence on the counter formed a mountain of irrefutable proof. Mark and Linda looked crushed beneath it, their earlier bravado evaporating as though it had never existed. Some passengers shook their heads at them with disgust, others openly booed. A man near the front shouted, "You should be fired right now," and the crowd erupted in agreement. Chloe's live stream surpassed 35,000 viewers, the chat filled with calls for accountability and praise for Naomi's composure. Ethan and Grace stood beside her like silent sentinels, their loyalty unshaken, their eyes reflecting both pride and awe at the precision with which Naomi dismantled her accusers. Accountability had to follow, and she had prepared for this moment as carefully as she had prepared any flight plan. Slowly, she reached into her briefcase once again, her movements deliberate, as if every second were scripted for maximum impact, and pulled out another set of documents stamped with corporate seals. Her voice remained calm but firm. Evidence means nothing if it isn't followed by action. Fortunately, action is exactly what I've been authorized to deliver. Gasps ran through the crowd as she unfolded the papers, the heavy signatures of executives clearly visible. This, she continued, holding the first page high enough for Amanda Foster's camera to capture, is an executive directive granting me full authority to take personnel action in real time when violations of corporate policy threaten safety, dignity, and reputation. And what we have here is the clearest violation possible. Linda's knees seemed to buckle, her face paling, while Mark's jaw worked silently as though searching for words that would not come. Naomi kept her gaze fixed on them, her tone measured like a judge issuing a sentence. "Ms. Parker, Mr. Ellison, you accused me of fraud, dismissed my credentials, threatened my job, and publicly humiliated me in front of passengers, staff, media, and more than 40,000 live viewers. You escalated what should have been a routine verification into a crisis. And in doing so, you exposed not only yourselves, but this entire company to federal penalties, civil liabilities, and massive financial damage. Under the authority granted by this directive, I am giving you a choice." The crowd leaned forward, phones raised, eyes wide. Naomi placed 2 pre-printed documents on the counter and slid them across. "You may resign immediately, with standard severance packages and legal protection from personal liability, or you may face federal investigation, public termination, and potential lawsuits for civil rights violations." You have 2 minutes to decide." The terminal exploded in murmurs. Passengers gasped, some clapping, others whispering in disbelief that they were witnessing careers destroyed in real time. Amanda Foster turned to the camera with visible astonishment. "This is unprecedented. Captain Harris has just offered her accusers the choice between resignation and legal consequences." Chloe's livestream count climbed past 45,000, the comment feed exploding with cheers, praise, and vindication. Mark's face flushed a deep red, his body rigid with pride and panic, but his hands trembled slightly at his sides. Linda's eyes filled with tears, her voice cracking as she whispered, I'll resign." The words carried across the terminal like a confession, stripping her of the last shred of authority she had held. Naomi gave a single nod and turned her gaze to Mark. His chest rose and fell heavily, his pride fighting against the inevitability of his downfall. He looked around the terminal, at the passengers recording, at the cameras, at Naomi's calm, steady eyes, and finally his shoulders sagged. "Me too," he said quietly, the words breaking from his lips like surrender. The terminal erupted in applause, the passengers cheering as though a verdict had been read. Chloe's viewers spammed the feed with celebration, victory emojis, and declarations of justice. Naomi did not smile. She simply reached into her briefcase once more and produced 2 pens, placing them beside the resignation letters she had prepared in advance. "Please sign and date," she instructed, her voice quiet but carrying the authority of inevitability. "HR will process your final paychecks within 48 hours." Mark and Linda bent forward, their hands trembling as they signed the papers in full view of passengers, staff, media, and tens of thousands of livestream viewers. Amanda Foster's cameraman zoomed in, capturing their signatures for the evening broadcast, sealing their disgrace in history. Naomi waited patiently until the last stroke of the pen was complete, then gathered the signed documents and tucked them neatly into her briefcase. The sound of the latch closing echoed like a final gavel. But Naomi was not finished. She turned back to the crowd, her voice steady, her eyes sharp. Individual accountability is important, but this is not only about 2 employees. This is about systemic reform. That is why, effective immediately, Skyjet Airways will launch Project Respect, a comprehensive program to eliminate bias and discrimination in our operations. Every customer-facing employee will undergo new training within 30 days. Any violation of our zero-tolerance policy will result in immediate termination without severance. And to ensure transparency, we are implementing real-time monitoring systems and independent oversight. Gasps of admiration ran through the passengers, and Amanda Foster leaned forward with her microphone, her voice trembling with excitement. "Captain Harris, are you saying this entire confrontation was part of a larger plan?" Naomi met her eyes calmly. "I am saying that systemic change requires more than words. It requires consequences and reform. What you have witnessed here is the first step." Ethan and Grace stood beside her, pride in their eyes, while Officer Martinez, who had been watching silently, nodded in approval. "Captain Harris," he said respectfully, "if every leader handled things this way, we wouldn't have half the problems we do." Naomi gave him a small nod before addressing the passengers once more. "Your dignity and safety matter as much as your tickets and your bags. From this moment forward, our commitment to you will be measured not in slogans, but in action." The terminal erupted again, this time not with anger, but with applause, cheers filling the air. Chloe's livestream surged to nearly 50,000 viewers, the chat filled with praise for Naomi's courage and strategy. It was already rippling outward like shockwaves through water, shaking foundations far beyond the passengers gathered at the gate. Chloe Grant's livestream viewer count, which had peaked at over 50,000 during the resignations, had not stopped climbing. It passed 60,000 as passengers exited flights and tuned in mid-walk, past 70,000 as social media platforms picked up the feed, and within an hour, the confrontation trended across the nation. Major hashtags blasted onto every trending chart. Hashtag respect in the skies, hashtag Captain Harris, hashtag Gate C12. Screenshots of Linda and Mark signing their resignations spread like wildfire, clipped into memes and articles before the ink had even dried. Naomi knew it was no longer just a victory for her. It had become a story about power, dignity, and justice in an industry long accused of bias. The corporate headquarters of Skyjet Airways felt the aftershock almost instantly. Naomi's phone vibrated with messages from board members, legal advisors, and executives who had spent years balancing image with damage control. Now, with millions of dollars already lost in stock value and tens of thousands of angry voices demanding reform, they were scrambling not to catch up but to align themselves with Naomi. She ignored the calls, leaving them unanswered in her pocket because she understood power better than they did. Power was not about chasing the noise but directing it, and she had already set the direction. Her authority was secured by signatures, her reforms outlined in Project Respect, and the proof of her leadership broadcast across every major network. By withholding her response, she forced executives to adapt to her, not the other way around. Amanda Foster, still clutching her microphone, received live confirmation from her station producer that the footage would air at the top of the hour nationwide. Her cameraman had already transmitted everything, and networks were competing to syndicate it internationally. Amanda turned back to Naomi, almost pleading, "Captain Harris, this is going global. The public wants to know what you'll do next. Is this about your dignity alone, or are you leading something bigger?" Naomi met her eyes with the calm of someone who had already rehearsed the future. "This was never about me alone. This is about every professional who's been disrespected, every passenger who's been disregarded, every worker who's been judged for the way they look instead of the work they do. Today, 2 people resigned. Tomorrow, an industry changes." Her words were clipped and deliberate, designed not for Amanda alone, but for the millions who would hear them replayed on evening broadcasts and see them quoted in headlines. Passengers cheered again, their faith in her rising, while others rushed to offer testimonies. One middle-aged woman spoke loudly into Chloe's livestream, explaining how she had once been pulled from a flight because of assumptions about her accent. A young man recounted how he'd watched his father, a decorated veteran, be humiliated at a gate because of his race. Each story poured into the feed, multiplying the power of Naomi's stand into a collective demand for justice. The aftershock was no longer about one captain at one gate. It had become a mirror reflecting years of quiet suffering that could no longer be ignored. Meanwhile, Linda and Mark realized the true weight of what they had lost. Their phones buzzed relentlessly in their pockets, but neither dared answer. Text from colleagues, supervisors, even families scrolled across their screens, all filled with disbelief, anger, or shame. Their resignations were not private HR matters. They were national headlines. Their names and faces had become synonymous with humiliation, and the stain would not wash off. Naomi did not gloat. She did not even look at them again. Their consequence had been delivered, their legacy sealed, and in her mind they were already irrelevant. Ethan, who had stood by Naomi through every accusation, touched her shoulder gently, his voice low but reverent. "Naomi, you've done more here today than most people manage in a lifetime." Grace added softly, "You didn't just protect yourself. You've changed the path for everyone after you." Naomi gave them both a quiet nod, acknowledging their loyalty without words, because she knew this was larger than gratitude. What she had built was not just a personal defense, but a precedent that others could follow, a template for resistance turned into reform. As the crowd thinned, Officer Martinez escorted Naomi toward a quieter corner of the terminal, his respect visible in his careful pace beside her. "Captain, I've seen a lot of confrontations in my years here. Most end in chaos or lawsuits. But what you pulled off, it was controlled, lawful, and final. The system bent in your favor because you forced it to, not because you screamed, but because you were smarter." Naomi gave him a faint smile. The loudest voice isn't always the strongest. Sometimes the strongest is the one holding the evidence. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I hope the rest of the country learns that from you." But Naomi also understood the danger of visibility. With every headline, every trending hashtag, she became both a beacon and a target. Reform never came without resistance, and those who had profited from silence would not forgive her easily. Yet she did not flinch. She had faced public humiliation, turned it into justice, and carried the weight of an entire industry on her shoulders. If resistance came, she was ready. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving Dallas-Fort Worth Airport bathed in a calm evening glow. But inside Naomi Harris's heart, the storm of the day had not yet quieted. The aftershock of her confrontation at Gate C-12 had spread beyond what anyone could have anticipated. Headlines on every major network, hashtags dominating every platform, passengers sharing their own painful experiences of discrimination, and corporate executives now forced into a corner they had spent years avoiding. Naomi had not just won a battle at a gate. She had cracked open the door to an industry-wide reckoning. Still, she knew this final stage was not about basking in victory, but about guiding the energy she had unleashed into something lasting. Sitting in the staff lounge, her uniform crisp though the day had drained her, Naomi received the call she had deliberately ignored earlier. This time, she answered not because she needed anything from them, but because they needed everything from her. On the other end was the Skyjet CEO. His voice stripped the arrogance she had endured for years, now coated in urgency. "Captain Harris, the board has seen the footage. The damage is spreading faster than we can manage. We need to meet. We need your leadership to restore trust." Naomi's reply was calm, deliberate, the voice of someone who had seized the high ground. "I don't restore trust for you. Trust is earned. If Skyjet wants a future, you'll adopt Project Respect fully, with oversight from an independent committee, and not a single clause weakened. This is not negotiable." Silence stretched on the line, heavy with the weight of corporate pride collapsing under public pressure. Finally, the CEO exhaled. "Then that is what we'll do." Naomi ended the call, knowing she had secured more than compliance. She had secured transformation. The next morning, headlines declared it a watershed moment. Skyjet Airways formally adopting anti-discrimination reforms designed by the very captain once humiliated at their own gate. Other airlines, seeing the tide, scrambled to announce similar initiatives, not out of virtue, but out of fear of backlash. Regulators signaled support, advocacy groups amplified the movement, and passengers pledged loyalty to airlines that treated dignity as non-negotiable. Naomi became not only a pilot, but the face of a reform wave sweeping through aviation, her image symbolizing strength carved from struggle. But beyond cameras and contracts, Naomi's victory found its truest meaning in the personal messages she received. A young black girl, dreaming of becoming a pilot, wrote to her, "When I saw you stand your ground, I saw my future. Thank you for proving people like me belong in the cockpit." A veteran shared, "You reminded me that service deserves respect, no matter the color of the uniform or the skin." A mother sent thanks for teaching her children that silence is not survival, that dignity can be defended. These voices mattered more to Naomi than boardrooms or trending charts. They proved that her fight had not been in vain, that her pain had been turned into possibility for others. Linda Parker and Mark Ellison, meanwhile, faded into obscurity, their names etched into the cautionary tale of unchecked arrogance. The world had moved past them, their downfall serving as a warning that positions of power were no shield against accountability. Naomi spared them no more thought. Her energy was devoted to building, not dwelling. Ethan and Grace stood faithfully at her side, their loyalty rewarded by witnessing a friend reshape history. Officer Martinez, once just a witness to disorder, now became a supporter, pledging his voice to ensure reforms reached law enforcement training as well. Months later, Naomi piloted her first flight since the confrontation, her Skyjet uniform gleaming under cabin lights, her 4 gold captain stripe symbols of resilience reclaimed. As passengers boarded, whispers of recognition rippled through the crowd, but instead of suspicion or doubt, she saw smiles, nods of respect, even quiet applause. She greeted them not as a symbol, but as their captain, the trust between crew and passengers restored not by policy alone, but by lived example. When the plane lifted into the sky, Naomi felt the weight of her struggle dissolve into altitude. This was not just a flight path, it was a promise kept. Her father's words echoed in her memory. When they push you down, you don't just stand up, you build higher than they ever dreamed. Naomi had built higher indeed. She had turned humiliation into reform, confrontation into transformation, and silence into a movement that could no longer be ignored. Her story would be studied in training manuals, recited in newsrooms, and whispered to young dreamers who needed proof that dignity could prevail. Yet for Naomi, the true victory was simpler. Knowing that she had left the world of aviation better than she had found it, that those who followed would fly on wings free of the chains she had broken. As the plane glided through clear skies, Naomi looked ahead with steady eyes. She had fought her battle, but the future belonged not to her alone. It belonged to every worker, every passenger, every child who would grow up believing the sky was theirs to claim. And in that vast horizon, Naomi Harris knew she had not just charted a new course. She had given an entire world permission to rise. The end. If this story kept you engaged, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me keep creating these kinds of dramatic, meaningful stories that carry a message about dignity and justice. I also want to hear what you think. What part of Naomi's journey struck you the most? And how did the twists in the plot land for you? Were you expecting the revelation of her true position, or did it take you by surprise? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're there, let me know where you're watching from. I always enjoy seeing the different places people tune in. Your voice adds so much to this community, and your feedback helps guide the next stories we bring to life.